Today we're talking about how Y Combinator sees the future of AI and agents. Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. Blissfully, we have a bit of a quiet day, which means that we get to do something that I've been looking forward to. I basically had this on deck for whenever we got a break from the blistering pace of news. Y Combinator is, of course, the best-known startup accelerator in the world, and every couple of cycles, they release what they call their request for startups. The idea here is that the partners of Y Combinator get together and talk about what they think the big themes of the future are going to be and where they'd like to see more entrepreneurs taking a crack at particular problems. Now, of course, these aren't the only companies that they'll accept. As they say, the list will only be a small fraction of the ideas they actually fund, but it's a way for them to give feedback to entrepreneurs who are looking for their next big idea what they think some of the key themes are. Well, they just recently released their Spring 2025 update, and of the 14 ideas, 13 are AI or at least AI adjacent. 8 of the 14 touch agents in some way. So what I want to do is use this as a way to preview the future that Y Combinator thinks is coming. I'm going to discuss the big categories that I see across these startup areas and hone in on a couple that I think personally are particularly interesting. So I think broadly speaking, you could categorize these 14 startup areas in roughly 4 buckets. The last one is other. There's one idea here that's sort of more about a founder profile than it is about a particular idea. So I'm leaving that one to the side. But outside of that, they all fit into one of 3 buckets: AI and agent infrastructure, agent applications, or AI applications. For the sake of focus, once again, I'm not going to spend as much time on the AI applications. I'll call them out briefly. One is compliance and audit, where partner Tom Blumfield points out that LLMs excel at the tasks of traditional compliance, including reading dense regulation, cross-checking internal policy, etc. This is a great example of one of those very unsexy but still very significant problems that AI can solve and just take entirely off the plate of humans. The other AI application is DocuSign 2.0. However, Michael Seibel argues that with the current crop of products, it's too hard to create a document template, avoid filling out duplicate information, correct document errors, etc. And so the idea is to use AI to simplify this process. All right, but now from there, let's move into the 2 categories that I think are really interesting: AI and agent infrastructure and agent applications. Infrastructure is the biggest category here. It is very clear that AI, but even more agents are coming down the pipeline, and Y Combinator is interested in the things that are going to enable that transformation. Some of them are dead on what you'd expect, like data centers. This one is not surprising. The world of the future requires more data, more power infrastructure, more cooling, more material procurement, more project management, and so anything around those themes is of interest. Where it starts to get even more interesting is where you're seeing Y Combinator start to make bets on which type of agentic applications are going to be ready for prime time in short order. One very catch-all area is called Dev Tools for AI agents, and basically is Y Combinator saying, we want people to keep making agents better. They're interested in agent builders directly, i.e. companies that enable their customers to easily create and deploy custom agents, as well as agent building blocks, tools, APIs, or platforms that enhance agent capabilities, enabling them to perform more complex actions and achieve greater impact. You could blow out that agent building block category into a million things. For example, one of the things that agents will at some point need to be able to do is access financial infrastructure. Plaid for agents feels to me to be one of those really obvious to conceptualize but very difficult to build type of projects that will make someone very, very rich over the next few years. You also get a sense of where we are in the agent development cycle. Partner Jared Friedman talks about browser and computer automation, effectively arguing that while we're starting to see agents be able to use computers in the form of OpenAI's Operator as well as Anthropic's computer use, that doubling down on this and giving agents even more access to the browser and using the computer is going to, quote, 10x the addressable use cases for AI agents. So building out that infrastructure seems extremely important. Another area of infrastructure is that we're starting to see Y Combinator adjust to a different scaling model. One of the themes from partner Diana Hu is inference AI infrastructure in the world of test time compute. If you're a regular listener, you'll have heard lots of discussion around how we've seen a shift in thinking around scaling from a focus on pre-training to a focus on applying compute at inference time. Diana points out that, quote, as AI apps 10x or even 100x the number of API calls to complex reasoning models, the infrastructure cost will become a real problem. And so what YC is interested in is better software at inference layer tooling, cheaper ways to handle GPU workloads, and optimizations. This is in many ways a doubling down on a key theme that has dominated conversation for the last couple of months. And the last 2 in this infrastructure category that I find interesting both relate in some way to how enterprises are going to use agents. Partner Dalton Caldwell calls out AI commercial open source software. And effectively the idea here is that many of enterprises' AI deployments are going to be custom builds built on top of open source software. However, when building with open source software, One of the things that you give up for the flexibility and freedom is, of course, the support. YC then is interested in companies that replicate some amount of the type of support you get from a closed source vendor, but in the context of enterprise open source deployments. Still, maybe the most interesting request for startups in this infrastructure section is B2A, software where customers will all be agents. The thesis here is pretty simple. Right now, a huge amount of internet traffic is people looking for information. Already, much of that is automated. It's bots and non-humans that are scraping and looking for information. However, what Y Combinator is interested in is software that explicitly recognizes that a lot of purchasing decisions are going to be made explicitly by agents in the future. And so rather than building services that support human internet use and human commerce decision-making, they think there's interesting ground for entrepreneurs to build services that specifically aim at serving agents. This is one of those fundamental shifts that I think will create just enormous opportunities. And so I'm really interested to see which startups take up that particular call. Now, moving on to the agent application section. Some of these are well-trodden territory. Not that YC shouldn't point them out because there's still a lot to build, but one of the themes, for example, is vertical AI agents. They define those as software that's built on top of LLMs that's been carefully tuned to be able to automate some kind of real important work. Now, what's interesting is that they argue that this opportunity is big enough to mint another 100 unicorns. For every category, they say, with a successful B2B SaaS company, you could imagine an even larger vertical AI company being built. And they argue that although this is a huge point of conversation, that we're still not thinking broadly enough, and that much of the entrepreneurial energy so far has been to very obvious applications, rather than the full expanse that the opportunity actually represents. Another one that's sort of well-trodden territory is AI personal staff for everyone. This is a classic Silicon Valley argument that a good way to guess at what the future of a consumer experience is going to be is to look at what only rich people can afford now and then imagine how it could be brought to everyone. The quintessential example is Uber and now Waymo giving people a private driver, which was never accessible until those companies existed. They're interested in how agents bring things like personal lawyers, money managers, personal trainers, private tutors, personal doctors to the realm of the everyday person. But lastly, maybe the most interesting one to me of all, across both the infrastructure and the agent application category, is one from Pete Kumin called The Future of Software Engineering. I'm actually going to read a big chunk of this one. Pete writes, "Language models can already write code better than most humans. This is going to bring the cost of building software down to zero. So will agents kill the job of software developer? No, we'll need more human software engineers in the future because software is going to run almost everything. These humans won't write much code directly. Instead, they'll manage teams of agents that build software for them. In addition to writing code, agents will perform most of the other specialized tasks required to build software, including QA, deployment, security and compliance audits, translations, operations, etc. We'd like to fund startups that enable small groups of generalist software developers to manage large teams of agents working together to build and ship lots of software." So two things that are interesting about this. One, it's obviously planting a flag in how they think economically this is going to play out, sort of a Jevons paradox, but instead of being about resource usage, being about talent deployment, where effectively the greater availability of intelligence and the reduction of the cost of intelligence will actually increase our utilization of intelligence. Now, I think that it makes sense that software engineering is the area that they're looking to first for this, but my bet is that this pattern, that the job doers of today will become the managers of agents of tomorrow, I think is a pattern that we're likely to see played out across lots and lots of different domains. Think social media managers. Instead of writing tweets and creating posts, they're going to be able to manage entire armies of agents that do that across multiple platforms at much greater scale. It is fascinating to think about how to actually build tools to manage those armies of agents. I think that this is going to be critical infrastructure for the future and something, like I said, that goes far beyond just software engineering. Anyways, like I said, I think this is a fun way to see how one influential Silicon Valley institution sees the future of AI and agents. Hopefully this gives you some ideas for what you might build. For now, though, that is going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Appreciate you listening or watching as always, and until next time, peace